Okay, so buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving headfirst into some really serious allegations. We're talking about Sean Diddy Combs, and, well, let's just say it's not pretty. We've got a whole stack of articles and legal documents right here, so let's unpack this together and try to make sense of it all.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember here is that this isn't just about one isolated incident or one lawsuit. This is about a pattern of behavior that's being alleged, and that makes it a much bigger conversation.
And when we say a pattern of behavior, we can't ignore the most recent lawsuit, right? The one filed by this Jane Doe. That's what really seems to have gotten everyone's attention.
Yeah, I mean, this lawsuit is, well, shocking, to say the least. This Jane Doe, she's alleging that Diddy, along with another man, drugged and raped her at a VMA's after party back in 2000.
Back in 2000, where?
Yeah, and the lawsuit says she was only 13 years old at the time.
13? Oh my gosh. That is incredibly young. And incredibly disturbing if it's true. Can you walk us through what the lawsuit actually says happened that night?
Sure. So according to the lawsuit, Jane Doe was at this party, and she was offered a drink. And after that drink, she started feeling really strange, disoriented. The lawsuit actually uses the word woozy, and she decided to find a place to lie down. But that's when, she claims, Diddy approached her in a bedroom, and she says he was looking agitated. He apparently told her, quote, "You are ready to party."
Oh, wow. That sounds incredibly intimidating, especially given the circumstances.
Absolutely. And that's when she alleges that the assault took place. She's claiming that Diddy and this other unnamed man raped her, and that there was even another woman present during the assault.
Another woman.
Yeah. Jane Doe says she was eventually able to get away. And she says she actually called her father from a gas station, just desperate for help.
That is a horrifying experience for anyone to go through, let alone a 13-year-old girl. Has she talked about how this has impacted her life since then?
Yeah, the lawsuit actually goes into some detail about that. It states that this entire experience has caused her, severe and ongoing emotional distress. It really emphasizes the profound and lasting trauma that she's endured since that night.
It's awful. And this lawsuit, it's just one of many legal challenges that Diddy's facing right now.
That's right, yeah. And to really understand just how serious this all is, I think we have to look at the bigger picture, the other accusations that are on the table. One of the charges is racketeering conspiracy, which might sound kind of confusing, but it basically means that he's being accused of engaging in a pattern of illegal activity as part of an organized group.
So like organized crime, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, there are the charges related to sex trafficking, which are, they're deeply, deeply concerning. And if you connect all of that back to the lawsuit from Jane Doe, it really starts to paint a very, very disturbing picture.
And we haven't even touched on the allegations about what the indictment calls freak-offs.
Right, the freak-offs. So these freak-offs, they're being alleged as these organized events where people were, essentially engaging in what sounds like violent and potentially non-consensual sexual acts. And there are even allegations that some of these freak-offs were filmed without consent.
Wow. Okay. So that just adds a whole other layer of disturbing behavior to this whole thing. It's important to remember, though, that as of right now, these are still just allegations. And Diddy is considered innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely, yeah. And his legal team is definitely pushing back hard against these claims. They're calling them baseless and opportunistic. They're basically saying that the sheer volume of accusations makes it nearly impossible to prepare an adequate defense.
It's going to be fascinating, to say the least, to see how all of this unfolds in court. But this brings up a larger question, doesn't it? Like, how are we, the public, supposed to approach these accusations? Especially considering how high-profile Diddy is and how long ago these alleged incidents occurred.
Yeah, it really is a tough one, isn't it? On the one hand, we have to remember that everyone deserves a fair trial, right? And that Diddy is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But on the other hand, when you have multiple accusations like this coming to light, it's hard to just completely ignore the possibility of a pattern of behavior.
Absolutely. And the timing of these accusations, some of them going back decades, that adds another layer of complexity here, doesn't it?
Oh, for sure. And this is where the whole concept of a statute of limitations comes in. Basically, it's a legal time limit, right? For how long someone has to file certain types of lawsuits. And the idea behind it, at least in theory, is to protect people from facing legal action when so much time has passed that, evidence might be lost, memories fade, things like that.
So it's kind of like you can't just accuse someone of something that happened 30 years ago out of the blue.
Well, yeah, that's the general idea. But of course, it's never quite that simple, is it? There are always exceptions. And the rules, they can be different depending on what type of crime we're talking about or what jurisdiction it falls under.
Okay, so that's definitely something to keep in mind as we continue to follow this case. But let's circle back to Diddy's defense for a minute. His lawyers are using some pretty strong language, calling the accusations baseless and opportunistic. I mean, what do you make of that?
Honestly, that's a pretty typical defense tactic, especially when you're dealing with cases that are this high profile. Essentially, what they're doing is they're trying to plant that seed of doubt. They're suggesting that maybe, just maybe, the accusers are motivated by fame, by money, something like that.
Well, yeah, it is Diddy we're talking about, right? He's a music icon. He's got a massive fortune. So I can see how that argument might hold some weight.
Exactly. It's a way to try to discredit the accusers, make people question their motives. But at the end of the day, we have to remember that just because someone is wealthy or powerful or famous, that doesn't automatically make them innocent, but it also doesn't automatically make them guilty.
That's a very good point. We can't jump to conclusions on either side. But this does bring us to a bigger issue here, don't you think? This whole idea of power dynamics, especially in industries like music and entertainment.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's be real. There's often a huge power imbalance in these situations, right? You've got the people who are in control, the ones calling the shots, and then you've got the people who are trying to break into that world, trying to make a name for themselves. And that kind of power dynamic, it can create a breeding ground for exploitation, for abuse.
And on top of that, if someone does experience something like that, it can make it incredibly difficult to speak out, to come forward.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's the fear of retaliation, right? Damage to your reputation, your career. And then there's the very real fear of not being believed, especially if the person you're accusing is someone with a lot of power and influence.
And that makes me think, even if there were witnesses to any of these alleged incidents, they might be very hesitant to come forward too.
Oh, for sure. And that's why cases like this are so incredibly challenging, so messy. There's so much to unravel. And it's crucial to try to look at all sides, while also acknowledging that there are almost always these underlying power dynamics at play.
It's a really difficult situation all around. And I think this case really brings those complexities to the surface. We have to remember that we're not just talking about legal definitions or abstract concepts here. We're talking about real people with real lives, real emotions, real trauma. It's a lot to process, no doubt about it. I mean, we're talking about serious accusations, a complicated legal battle, and then, of course, the weight of these power dynamics, like you were just talking about. What stands out to you, I guess, as we try to kind of wrap our heads around all of this?
Well, I think what's really interesting here, and this is true regardless of how this case actually ends up playing out in court, is that it's really sparked a much larger conversation, hasn't it? It's forcing us to kind of confront these uncomfortable truths about the possibility of abuse within these systems. And I'm not just talking about the music industry here. I'm talking about, across all kinds of industries and sectors.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it's a reminder that fame and fortune and all of that, it doesn't make anyone invincible, right? It doesn't put you above the law.
Exactly. And it also really highlights just how important it is to believe survivors, to create an environment where people feel safe to speak out against injustice, no matter who the accused might be.
Well said. This entire situation, it really just underscores the weight of these accusations and how incredibly difficult it can be for people to come forward, to share their stories.
It does. And I think it's crucial to keep reminding ourselves that, behind all of the headlines and the legal jargon and everything else, there are real people whose lives are deeply, deeply affected by all of this.
This deep dive has been heavy. There's no doubt about it. We've covered a lot of ground here. Everything from the specific allegations against Diddy to the bigger picture stuff like power dynamics and the complexities of, even just what it means to seek justice in a situation like this. So where do we go from here?
I think this deep dive, it leaves us with more questions than answers, which honestly might be okay. It challenges us, all of us, to think critically about the information that we're consuming, to question the narratives that we're being presented with, and to have these, sometimes tough conversations about the things that matter, even when they're difficult, even when they make us uncomfortable.
Very well said. Well, you've definitely given us, and I'm sure our listeners, a lot to think about today. So thank you for being here, for helping us navigate this really complex and very sensitive case. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has provided you with some insights and maybe even inspired you to do a little digging of your own. Thanks for listening.